Good.
Yep.
He kept it.
Welcome to the Oregon City Council regular meeting for January the 9th, 2023. The time now is 7:01, and we will open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Evans, you take a roll call of council, please.
Mr. Davish?
Here.
Mr. Drake?
Here.
Mr. Horniak?
Here.
Mrs. Paula? Here. Mr. Reeves?
Here.
Mr. Wallensack?
Here.
Mr. Zale?
Here. And also present at tonight's meeting is Mayor Michael Safarian, City Administrator Joel Major, Clerk of Council Tina Evans, Law Director Melissa Pecora, Public Service Director Paul Roman, Chief of Police Brandon Began, or excuse me, Brandon is not here. We have Assistant Chief of Police Ryan Spangler, Fire Chief Clayton O'Brien, Assistant Fire Chief Mark Mullins. Council, the first order of business for this evening will be the approval of the meeting minutes for November 28th, 2022 and December the 12th, 2022.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves,
I move to approve the minutes from the November 28th, 2022 and December 12th of 2022 regular council meetings as presented.
thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Horniak. Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, the meeting minutes for November the 28th and December 12th, 2022 have been approved. Council, since we did not have a meeting due to the holidays, we need to add items 1 through 4, 2023 to this week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Ms. Paula. Thank you, Ms. Paula. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, items 1 through 4, 2023 have been added to this week's agenda. First item is presented by Mayor Michael J. Safarian, item 001, 2023, and I will defer to the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President and council. I think most of you have heard the spiel from me many times because it's the same one that we have every first meeting of the year, and that's regarding item 1 of 2023. The other only differences the other years would be 22 and going all the way back to 1975. This would have been the first ordinance, and it's the ordinance that does permit our departmental heads to conduct business in their departments. And these, to have money in their budget comes through the budget you pass, so they have it available. And without this ordinance, it wouldn't make sense to have ordinances on every purchase they make. And it comes in trusting our departmental heads to run their shops. So if there's any other questions of how this may work, like I said, it's been ordinance number 1 since 1975.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, any questions or comments regarding item 001?
Mr. President,
Mr. Drake.
this either for Joel or the mayor, isn't there a dollar amount?
This is, yeah, there is. It's a $25,000
Okay.
and go ahead, Mr. Roman.
If I could, Mr. President and Mr. Dre, this only authorizes us to get bids on purchases.
Mhm.
Anything over 25,000 does require an ordinance to come back to council. So, and we went through the budget process, but the main purpose of this ordinance is to authorize us to get quotes and bids for all our projects.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any other questions or comments regarding item 1?
Mr. President,
Mr. Wallensack.
thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move for passage of, well, you gotta, sorry, I'm jumping ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Wallensack.
Prime in the pump.
Okay, council, hearing no more questions or comments, I will assign item 001, 2023 as ordinance 001, 2023, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the city administrator, director of public service, chief of police, fire chief, commissioner of parks and recreation, commissioner of building and zoning inspection, finance director, and other municipal administrators, subject to the written authorization of the mayor to take bids on equipment, materials, supplies, maintenance agreements, and insurance from time to time without the requirements for further legislation to be adopted by city council and declaring an emergency.
Council.
Mr. President.
Mr. Walensee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move for passage of ordinance number 1 of 2023 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Walensee.
Second.
Second by Mr. Horniak. Or is that Mr. Davish? Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Evans, you should take a roll call vote. Council, please.
Mr. Walensee?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mrs. Powell?
yes,
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 001-2023 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. The next item up for consideration is item 002-2023, which is also presented by Mayor Michael J. Safarian. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. And somewhere around item number 2, this usually falls in, sometimes it gets mixed up and it might be 3 or whatever. But the Oregon Growth Corporation's probably, I believe, the only function they have is running the parade that we have on Oregon Day for Oregon Fest. So this links the city and to Oregon Growth Corporation. And we have different things like we insure, I believe, things there, and we provide small amounts of funding for them for that parade. But without our association with them, they really aren't sanctioned as much of a corporation. So, like I said, once again, this is traditionally 2 or near 2 or number of ordinances every year.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, any questions or comments regarding item 2 of 2023? Hearing none, I will assign item 2, 2023 as ordinance 2, 2023. Oh, yes, sorry, as a resolution, and ask Ms. Evans to read into the record.
Resolution recognizing Oregon Spring Fest as a community-sponsored event authorized by the Oregon Growth Corporation.
Council.
Mr. President.
Mr. Horniak.
I move for passage of resolution 2 of 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Ms. Evans, would you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mrs. Powell?
yes,
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Walensee?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Resolution 2 of 2023 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. Next item for consideration is item 3, 2023, presented by Mayor Safarian and Public Service Director Paul Roman, and I will defer to Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to enter into what's called a local public agency or LPA agreement with ODOT. The city did receive a $500,000 grant from the Federal Highway Administration to pave Wynn Road from Cedar Point to Corduroy, and Corduroy Road from Wynn Road to North Stadium, including the intersection of Corduroy and Stadium. The agreement basically sets up the responsibilities between ODOT and the city to carry out the project, and that is all listed in Exhibit A. For this project, we will do the design and the construction management. So, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions or comments regarding item 3, 2023?
Mr. President.
Mr. Walensee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Roman, when will we plan on going into design on this project?
Mr. President, Mr. Walensee, over the next year, the money really won't be available till 2024. But we may do some survey work this year and design in-house. And like I said, it'll be in 2024.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Walenzak. Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any other questions or comments regarding item 3? Hearing none, I will assign item 3, 2023 as ordinance 3, 2023, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation for funding from the Federal Highway Administration for the bid and construction of the LUCCR 1802.26 Corduroy Road and Wynn Road PID 118110 and declaring an emergency.
Council.
Mr. President.
Mr. Davish.
I move for passage of ordinance 3 of 2022 as emergency.
Thank you, Mr.
23.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Ms. Pauloff. Thank you, Ms. Pauloff. Ms. Evans, would you take a roll call vote of council on item 3, or ordinance 3?
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mrs. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzek?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 3 of 2023 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. The next item, item 4, 2023, is once again presented by the mayor, Michael Safarian, and our public service director, Paul Roman. And once again, I will defer to Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to purchase a polymer to dewater biosolids at the wastewater treatment plant. This particular the maker, SNF Polydyne, is the sole provider for this Clarivac polymer, and we've tried all kinds of polymers. This has been the best, and we've been using this product for about 4 or 5 years now. The cost has gone up by 18% versus last year, but to be quite honest, with all the other chemicals we've purchased, that's a pretty small increase versus a lot of others. So, but this money, or this purchase, was included in the 2023 budget, and be again happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions or comments regarding item 4 of 2023? Hearing none, I will assign item 4, 2023 as ordinance 4, 2023, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor, finance director, and director of public service to issue purchase orders to SNF Polydyne, 1 Chemical Plant Road, Riceboro, Georgia, for the purchase of Clariflox C-6266, a dewatering polymer for the wastewater treatment plant, and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Davish.
I move for passage of ordinance 4 of 2023 as an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Ms. Pauloff. Thank you, Ms. Pauloff. Ms. Evans, would you take a roll call vote of council on item 4, please, or ordinance 4?
Mr. Davish?
Yes.
Mrs. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenzek?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 4 of 2023 passes with 7 yeas and 0 nays. And that does complete our items for consideration this evening. I will move to the mayor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have I think, one thing here, and that is an appointment to the BZA. And it's a renewal of a current board member, Mike Rowe, who happens to be the chairman of the Board of Zoning Appeals, doing a great job. We asked him earlier today if he would consider continuing on and making his term from 1/1/23 to 12/31/25. He said he would. And so with that, I would ask council's concurrence in the reappointment of Michael Rowe of 3704 Brown Road to the Board of Zoning Appeals, once again with his term from 1/1/23 to 12/31/25. And once again, I ask council's concurrence in that appointment.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
I concur with the mayor's appointment of Michael Rowe to the Board of Zoning and Appeals commencing 1/1/23 to 12/31/25.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Reeves. Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Council, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, Mayor, council does concur with the continuing appointment of Michael Rowe.
And I appreciate that. And with that, I would conclude my report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Major.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have nothing to report.
Thank you, Mr. Major. Ms. Pepora.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Pepora. Mr. Roman.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Mr. Reeves.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Mr. Wallenzak.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenzak. Mr. Davish. Thank you, Mr. Davish. Ms. Paula.
Thank you, Mr. President. With it being National Police Officer Appreciation Day, I'd like to extend a great big thank you to our police department and everything they do for the city. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Paula. Mr. Horniak.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. And I do not have a report from my standing committee, but I do want to instruct council on the fact that next Monday is Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. So we will not, the city offices will not be open. If there's enough agenda for a committee of the whole meeting next week, it'll be on Tuesday. but we'll see what comes up with that. And that concludes my report. We do have a couple people signed in to speak this evening. Ruth Price, would you please come to the podium, state your name and your address for the record, please?
My name is Ruth Price, 5255 Seaman Road. First of all, I'm going to read a paper that's up here on the podium. It says all microphones are at a start meeting. If you turn your microphone off, a red light comes on. You will need to turn it back on to speak. Speak directly into the microphone within 2 to 3 inches. When you turn your head from the microphone, we can't hear. Needless to say, we can't hear many of you when you're looking out this way. This has been an ongoing thing. We've needed new microphones for some time that people can hear. We come here. Tina, you're this far from the microphone. Mr. Dravick, he doesn't. So it's something you need to think about. Okay. First thing I want to talk about is I think you're probably aware of donations for the wreaths across America that they were doing at Christmas time, the veterans. Doug Sweeney from Arquette Road, he is a past veteran, but he has taken a personal interest in this. And he spoke at the Republican Club meeting on Thursday night. They did Willow Cemetery, St. Ignatius, North Oregon, and the one, I think it's Oakwood, the small cemetery that's out in the country. I asked him about First St. John's Lutheran Church at Seaman and Wheeling because of the fact that there are so many veterans, many of them World War II veterans. We have one at least I know that was killed during World War II. There's 104 there. And so I've sort of taken it upon myself to help him out with that. Any donations that are received before January 17th, the veterans will match. I already have $100 and I haven't even tried to collect yet. So I think it would be something, they've included the Boy Scouts in putting the wreaths on. The volunteer fire department has helped. They're getting to have as many as they can. They're going to try to have the Boy Scouts go, I believe he said I don't know if it was the middle of February, to go through the cemeteries and pick those wreaths up, because by that time they're not going to look too good. So anyway, that's something I'd like you people to think about. I think it would be a great thing. My father and my uncle are out at Toledo Memorial, and as big as that was, there were wreaths out there. So that took a lot of people to put those wreaths. The wreaths run $15 a piece. So anyway, it would be nice. I know St. John's is in Toledo. It's right over the border, but still there's many, many people, men there. One of our past fire chiefs, Gene Grohl, is buried there. Okay. The rezoning. It's not only not fair to the people that have built new houses, but it's not fair to the people that are just south of Corduroy Road, which there are many there. And I think it's something that we really need to think about. There's so much property that the city owns that could be developed and not encroach on the residential area of our city. I was speaking to a council member last meeting when I spoke a long time about the zoning. And this person made a comment that his house was getting a lot of smell from BP. And my brain wasn't thinking at the time, but afterwards I thought, but you had the choice of buying there because BP's been there a long time. And like the people of Eagles Landing, they moved in, but BP was there. So I think that's something we need to think about. The people on Wind Road, you said, were notified that that was a possibility. But the existing people on the south side of Corduroy, they're just innocent people. Okay, and Mayor, I asked 2 weeks ago at the meeting, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, how much property the city has purchased, undeveloped property. And I asked for a list of that or the acreage. I've not received that, so I'm making a second request for that, and possibly how much money was spent buying this property. I understand through people that I have talked to that much of this property that the city has purchased, the city's going to be responsible for water, sewer, and electric. So that's another expense. Plus, we're still paying for taxes on much of this property. So I'd like more information on that. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Price. Next person is Beth Ackerman. Ms. Ackerman, just state your name and your address for the record, please.
Beth Ackerman, 931 Berry Road. I was unable to attend some of your zoning meetings. I regret that. I knew this was coming, the zoning change up there in the Wynn Corduroy area, primarily because we farm that land, a lot of it. Unlike any of you, we stand to financially lose if it's developed, but that's not the point. It's just that's how I'm aware of the development up there. I have known that there is a forest shrub federally recognized wetland on there of about 7 acres. I was hoping, instead of coming here and preaching at you and saying, hey, do you guys know there's a wetland there? I was hoping you would take initiative, at least when you tried to develop out our way. Mr. Beasley recognized that there was wetland there, but he just considered it easily mitigated. You guys aren't even recognizing that there is a wetland there. I don't believe the zoning change has taken place, correct?
Correct.
Okay, according to your website, well, actually OEDF, which is your website, Cedar Point Industrial Park is already being advertised for sale as C1 Commercial Industrial, including the wetland. There's no mention of a wetland, let alone a mitigation. There's no mention of any kind of environmental assessment. And don't get me wrong, I understand, I appreciate that you're looking at that as like, hey, we'll infill or this area where there is some existing industrial. I do sympathize with the fact that you've got a quandary, or maybe you don't, maybe I've got a quandary over, hey, there's a wetland there. I can see that you have not made any attempt to determine the impact on that. And so that scares me for the rest of Oregon, because it shows me how you're going to treat the rest of the wetlands in Oregon. If there's money to be made and somebody wants a zoning change, we'll just do it. So I don't know, again, why you're advertising something inaccurately to outsiders. There's a wetland there. I'm sorry, I didn't put it there. You can't blame me for it, but it's there, and it's a situation we have to deal with, and I hope you'll take that into consideration. I was hoping maybe somebody come up with the idea of putting it in a conservancy. That would bring in some money for Mr. Cohn. That's your job. That's your job. If you want to change the zoning on a federal wetland, it's on you guys to handle it responsibly. And I just don't know how you can be trusted moving forward with any property inside the city limits. I've been watching to see how you handle this. And when I saw that today, that if you guys already have the zoning change, you do this all the time. You misrepresent the city of Oregon to outside interests. You're giving us a bad reputation. Can't be trusted. The things that you put up there for sale are inaccurately reported. It's not zone C1 already. And I was disappointed to see that. On another note, I know I want TCU to win tonight. I know y'all want to go see the kickoff. And so I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but that's all.
Thank you, Ms. Ackerman. Mr. Ryan, please come to the podium, state your name and your address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Glenn Ryan, 2707 Pickle Road, apartment 25. After the December 12th meeting in which I addressed solar lighting to y'all, Mr. Roman was kind enough to give me a copy of the letter he had sent to the city council and a Toledo Edison marketing flyer. So going home, I read Mr. Roman's letter, and I noticed that he neglected to mention 3 economic variables that were mentioned in the disclaimer just below the table to the marketing flyer. And the disclaimer read, the costs are based on an average price of 0.04 per kilowatt. This cost will fluctuate depending on the actual rate, the current price to compare, and if the customer chooses an alternative electrical supplier. And then it goes on to mention that in addition to the total monthly cost, the customer may be responsible for an additional rider charges per the streetlight tariff. Now, the 2 things that caught my eye was the cost based on the additional, that the cost was an average cost, the 0.04 cents per kilowatt. That was an average cost. How did they come up with that average? Did they take every pole in Oregon and, figured it out that way? It doesn't stipulate. And the other thing that really got me wondering is, what is this additional rider charges per the streetlight tariff? How much cost is that costing? Are they tariffing every single pole? Is there a charge on every single pole? Or how is that tariff determined? So considering these potential unknown variable costs, the cost that the council received in Mr. Roman's letter may be inaccurate. And I would like to know, what is the actual cost per light? Is this a daily or an hourly cost? What do they mean when they say current price to compare? How is that cost determined, and how much is that the cost to the city, if any? And then the third one is the streetlight tariff. We will set aside the alternative. They also mentioned about the if the customer chooses an alternative electrical supplier, we'll put that aside for right now. I say this because in the December 9th letter, he makes no mention of any of these potential costs or the amount, if any. So it is unknown if he had attempted to determine these costs when he drafted the memo to you guys. Now, I'm not casting aspersions, okay? I'm just pointing out the fact that there's no data. And if the cost variables that may be an important factor in influencing the council decision the next time streetlight replacement or new development begins. And Mr. Roman's letter, he also mentioned the battery issue that you had with the streetlight signs. First, I'm assuming those streetlight signs are battery operated. They run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That process makes it hard on a battery. The streetlights only run from dusk to dawn, and this gives the battery time to reset and recharge. the battery life of these particular solar poles that is double, the ones that I'm touting, is double the life of the normal solar poles. The battery for this one that I advocate is a 10-year lifespan. And not only that, is once the battery is recharged, there's a mechanism within the light itself that as the battery starts wearing down a little bit, the light dims just a little bit to compensate for the life of the battery. And so it also has a 10 to 12-year warranty. So if the battery discharges for whatever reason within the first 10 or 12 years of its usage, they will replace it for free. Now, let's see here. Mr. Roman also mentions that in council that there needs to be consistency in this product. And I'm not sure what he means by that, because if you go ahead and you look around at all the solar poles on the market, it's like buying a car. There, you got your Cadillacs, you got your Fords, you got your Pacers, and so there's a whole different market. But unfortunately, I want you to know that I have no financial stake in this company. I'm picking them out because I did the legwork for you in finding a vendor who I believe will give the city the most bang for its buck. And it's also a potential to reduce property taxes in the long term, depending on how you finance the poles. According to the company that are making the poles, the city stands to receive a 30% discounts on the purchase from the federal government due to tax incentives for cities wanting to reduce their carbon footprint. As for our carbon footprint, I would like to remind council that this city gets most of the electricity from Toledo Edison, and that is fueled by either a natural gas or a coal generator. Both commodities are expected to rise in price. In fact, Columbia Gas just put in for a 10% across the board raise this year. In future proposals, I hope that these electrical factors, price factors that I mentioned are reported. Citizens of the city have a right to have an accurate appraisal of what those costs are. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Council, does any council member have anything else to add to this evening's meeting? Hearing nothing, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Second, Mr. Davish. Councilor, any objections? This meeting is adjourned. What's that?